And so I think at this point, I'd like to, well, formally open this Fireside Chat, episode 3 of the PAASE. And for those of you who do not know PAASE, it stands for the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering. It's 40 years old, founded in the United States. And now we are about 400 scientists and engineers of Philippine descent based in the Philippines, United States, and other countries in the world. And we also have our PAASE honorary members, and we have 5 of them. So the first was Dado Banata, but now we have National Scientist Emil Javier, Father Ben Nebres. We have former NASA President Willie Padolina, a former DOST Secretary, and we also have former President Fred Pascual. So this is PAASE. We have this series called Fireside Chats for Burning Issues. And the first was co-hosted with USAID Stride. And the topic was enabling innovation-centered strategic planning in Philippine universities, focused on SUPs, state universities and colleges, and also private higher education institutions.
Bluetooth connected.
Okay, I request everyone to mute, and we will just get the speaker to unmute. Thank you. So Fireside Chat episode 2 was last Thursday. So this is like every Thursday. And the topic was S&T Human Capital Development, building a robust S&T human capital for a resilient economy, okay? For economic resilience and recovery and resilience. And there our guests were our honorary members and former Secretary Bernia. And from that episode last week, it was very clear that we have to invest in human capital development earlier on. And Father Ben Nebres and everyone else agreed that we should start in high school. So today's discussion will focus on junior high, so grades 7 to 10, where students would decide to take the STEM track K11-12, and then it will also extend to undergraduate, freshman and sophomore years education in science and math. So I think that with this background, I'd like to, at this point, thank you all for joining. And I already recognized the participation of our guests from private industry. Earlier, former CHED Chair and UE President Esther Garcia reminded us that we should have invited DepEd officials or representatives. And I think that that's very good. But I also thought that as an outcome or output of this chat, we would have actionable implementable actions, but it's always nice to showcase or successes or show proof of concept of proof of principle. So Dr. Esther, I know that we will soon contact DepEd, but also we must be able to put our, our story together and show that together with the Bernidos and the inputs of the other speakers today, we have something that is very, very viable that could probably get support from the private sector, which we also said is very important at this time. Okay, if government cannot deliver the services, the basic services by itself, then we need to call on the private sector for what we call PPPs, public partnerships. At this point, I would like to introduce my co-moderator, none other than Chris Bernido, President of Central Visayan Institute Foundation, academician of the National Academy of Science and Technology, and physicist, principal researcher of the Institute of Theoretical Physics based in Hagna. So Chris?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Giselle, and good morning to everyone. I'll just introduce to you our speakers for this morning. We will be starting with Dr. Maria Victoria Carpio Bernido of Central Visayan Institute Foundation. And she will be followed by Dr. Giovanni Tapang, who is currently the Dean of the College of Science of UP Diliman. He will talk about his work on Visor. And then after Dr. Tapang, we will go to Dr. Mario Santo Domingo, who is with the Department of Psychology of the University of Maryland. And after Dr. Domingo, we will proceed to Dr. Cedric Feistin of the Department of Computer Science. He will be talking about connectivity infrastructure, and he will also be followed by Dr. Roel Ocampo of the Electrical and Electronics Engineering of UP Diliman, who would also talk about internet connectivity, which is very necessary in our country today. And before we proceed to the first speaker, allow me to read the guide questions that were sent to the speakers. There are 8, so I'll just quickly read the guide questions. The first one is train more. How can PAASE help train more and better science and math teachers in the basic education and in the early college years? Second, how can PAASE help teach empirical, experimental, and think out of the box discovery and hypothesis-driven science to our youth? The third guide question is, how can PAASE help teach mathematics, quantitative, computational, and statistical science based on real problem solving and real data and not based on rote exercises? This is followed by, how can PAASE help teach the basic natural sciences such as chemistry, biology, and physics, which are important foundations for the environmental sciences, engineering sciences, health, and medicine? And then the fifth guide question is, how can PAASE help make use of new ICTs and new curated MOOCs to bring STEM education to remote schools in the Philippines? And the next question is, how can PAASE help organize STEM programs that are student-centered, strengths-based, and geared towards student success? And second to the last is, how can PAASE help change the culture of science teaching and learning to optimize retention and academic performance? And the last guide question is, how can PAASE help establish interinstitutional mentoring to help guide universities towards student and faculty research productivity? So these are the speakers can pick on any guide question that they would like to answer and deal on. So I guess Dr. Rizal, we can proceed to the first speaker. We give them about 10 minutes each, I guess.
Yes. So Marivic can start now. Hi.
Good morning to all. Thank you very much, Giselle, for the invitation and for organizing this Fireside Chat. Actually, those guide questions, each question could be one lecture in itself or even a book, but we'll try our best in 10 minutes to just give the highlights. I'll address only the first few questions because that's my area right now. First of all, when we talk about teacher training, it's now a contentious issue. Many groups, because of, well, convention, tradition, what is fashionable at the moment, because of accepted pedagogical dogma, and this dogma have been supported by the advanced countries doing well very now at present. So we tend to subscribe to this dogma. So the usual approach to teacher training is obvious: to teach teachers, to train teachers, and conduct. And personally, I have actually been a resource person for such training before I got involved in high school. So I became a DOST resource person. Whenever UP Physics had sessions for training teachers, I would be part of the volunteers. And of course, I was observing then, but that was in the 1980s. That's how old I am. 1980s, 1990s. And we realized by now, after the DLP, that such programs were really not as effective. They are, they require big budgets. They require much energy because you have to get the good resource persons. You have to assemble all these teachers. And some of them might even feel that they're just being forced for the training. So in our approach, in the second guide question, there's mention there of thinking out of the box with the personal experiences as resource person, training teachers in science and math, and then finally getting involved and 150% immersed in high school education for the past 20 years. I now think it's extremely urgent for us to think out of the box. And of course, I'm biased. I would support our dynamic learning program because really we conceptualized that because of the fact that we could not see good numbers from the conventional approaches. And we want numbers, we want good numbers, we want increasing trends. And so in this case, we designed a program we're in, and I think some people who are, especially in PAASE, you could also think of other approaches wherein the learning is not so dependent on the teachers. Of course, we have many stories about being inspired by teachers. That's true. But it seems that we should give more weight now to the subject matter itself, and the thinking processes involved in the subject matter would be the ones that would inspire the students. So whether or not they have a good teacher, they could be inspired to take up science. So that's for teacher training. We have to think out of the box at this point. And actually, it's not so difficult now because of online resources and with technology. There is so much we can do actually. We just have to go back to the first principles and not be bound by the conventional pedagogical dogma. And now the second that I would like to address, one of the guide questions talks about teaching real problems, solving real world problems. And as I said, this would again require actually more than an hour's lecture worth of discussion or a book in itself, because again, we have to be very careful when we talk about teaching real world problems and avoiding rote exercises. Because rote exercises, rote learning, memorization can also be important. That's a skill that can be developed for those who would be going to medicine, going to law. Before they can analyze, they have to know by heart the law, the constitution, medical cases, cutting edge research in different areas. So learning would also incorporate some rote, some exercises, mastering of the fundamentals, very simple exercises, but very good foundation before they can address analytically, critically, and comprehensively real world problems. So when we speak these words, for me now, after 20 years in high school education, in college and graduate school education, I can say that we have to be very careful. We have to qualify each word that we use, because it's so easy to say, let's give them heavy problems, meaty problems. But then if the students are not equipped with the fundamentals, we go back to the same problems that we have. So that's my response. And then the next would be another issue really is laboratory and hands-on, especially for those implementing our programs. And now that we are in pandemic conditions, how do we teach laboratory when students cannot go to the labs? Now we're actually, if we go back again to first principles, I mentioned this in one of my talks or one of the discussions here. The National Research Council and the academies in the US actually did a comprehensive research, did a comprehensive study of the effect of laboratory education in the high schools in the US. Now, laboratory and science lab education in the US and in many other countries, including the Philippines, since we normally follow the US, is actually based on the Harvard list of experiments at the turn of the century. Now, they did this comprehensive study, released the document, I think it was in 2006, and the conclusion is, well, inconclusive. There is no significant learning achieved with this standard list of lab exercises and experiments that have to be done. So again, my advice is go back to the first principles. And my thesis, together with Chris, our thesis for the DLP really is, at least at the high school level, we do not even need sophisticated lab equipment or even the standard list of released by Harvard at the turn of the century and followed by many schools all over the world. That's very good for us, especially now in the pandemic, because that simply means we do not need much. We just have to delve into the creativity that we can cook up with what the students have in their households. So for college, of course, you need lab. For graduate school, you need lab. But during pandemic conditions, our advice when asked, our 2-cent worth of opinion always would be, well, for any human endeavor, there will be a theory part, an analysis part, a critique part, without the hands-on. That can be done while the students do not have access to the laboratory. There are so many things we can do. As scientists, if we simply, what is in the guide questions, think out of the box. We can be innovative. There is so much we can do at the high school level, college level, graduate school level. As my mother used to say, wag niyong hahanapin yung wala. Do whatever you can do with what you have. So we don't look for what we don't have. Pandemic conditions and beyond. And the third point that I would like to focus, well, at least give attention to would be the curriculum. Again, I have mentioned this in other fora and other discussions. We were disappointed when it was mandated and included and legislated in the Constitution for the whole Philippines to adopt the spiral curriculum. This has been going on, the vacillation between spiral and discipline. If you look at the history of our educational curriculum since the turn of the century, it has been vacillating between these two. No extensive analysis has been done on the merits of each approach, but now we are all bound to follow the spiral curriculum. And for us, again, from 20 years of experience, we say the discipline, the spiral curriculum has weakened many students and may weaken millions more if we don't act now. And due to time constraint, I will again now, those would be the points, but I would also like to mention as part of the solution, because Giselle has been emphasizing she would like actionable, and we agree with her. If otherwise we'll just be talking and we'll just be chatting and not really get results. So our proposal, which again we have mentioned before, would be careful discretization of the life cycle or the chain or the links between basic education, college level, master's and PhD. And when I say discretization, it's really cutting it up into small pieces so that we would know which are the bottlenecks, where at which points do we have cancerous tumors growing, blocking the pipeline, and really do that analysis carefully. I remember as a model, we have the National Institute of Physics. In the 1980s, 1990s, attrition rate was just so high, which means number of failures at the college level in physics classes. And that was addressed systematically by the faculty by the late 1990s and into the 2000s. And they were able to address that, which means if a certain percentage of students fail, say 75% of students fail in a physics class, definitely that's not just student-owned. It could be professor-owned problem. And so that National Institute of Physics was able to address that. And then they also had the problem of first year, second year college students joining research groups and failing in their core subjects. That was also addressed. So that's what I mean by discretization. We really go step by step so we know where the loopholes are. And my final remark, my 10 minutes would be up soon. Chris and I, we have always felt this personally. We share accountability with everything that's going on in the country. So if we make wrong decisions in basic education or in higher education, then the people out there in the streets suffering from poverty, homelessness, disabilities, hospital beds with 4 patients or more in public hospitals, then for me, I feel partly responsible. If we don't act, then we are partly responsible for any person out there, any Filipino suffering right now. So that's all I can say at this point. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marivic. Now maybe we can proceed to our next speaker. Dr. Giselle, is Dr. Tapang already available? You're muted, Dr. Giselle.
So Gani is now in, just got admitted into the meeting. So there you are, Gani.
I'm sorry
Okay.
po. I thought it was just tonight. My schedule nakatalagay tonight. Sorry.
It's your turn to speak, Gani.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Apologies for signing in late. We actually had this project spearheaded by PAASE. PAASE was the one, together with Dr. Romel Gomez, who went around and talked about Visor. Visor is a project that we've been doing since 2012. This is, as I said, thought about by Dr. Romel Gomez of the University of Maryland. And he was thinking of bringing home home in the Philippines, a device that can be used by all students so that they can just connect their sensors and do laboratory work easier than what we have been doing in the past few decades. I remember his example at that time when doing an experiment, say in physics, looking at a car going down in an inclined plane. There are two things that the student would be thinking about. One, how fast he can turn on and off a timer, and also to observe the motion of the car. Now, where is the science there? The science is really in the motion of the car in the inclined plane, rather than having your wrist as fast as you could, pressing the timer as fast as you could. And therefore, for you to be able to focus on science and doing science, there must be some way to enhance data collection, using sensors. And at that time, platforms such as the Arduino were becoming more popular and becoming more accessible. And programming, sensor making, and connecting them to the computer has never been more easier compared to the previous years. And that's where Visor came in. Visor is Versatile Instrumentation System for Science, Education, and Research. Romel Gomez was thinking maybe what we should do is to bring this setup of Visor and maybe have modern science labs for all colleges and universities in the country. And that became our tagline, bringing modern science labs in all schools in the country, especially in a country like the Philippines, where we didn't really have any laboratories available. If you actually have a sensor system or a lab system like the one with PASCO, most often than not, you would see it in a display cabinet because it's expensive. There's only one unit for the whole school, and teachers would not let students use that. So we were aiming for a low-cost modern science laboratory solution for colleges. And where does it come into this whole early STEM education? Now, if we're unable to provide our students in the high school, for example, ways to do science, and science is not really just the theoretical part. Of course, there is all of that analytical thinking, all of that absorption of information. But for our students to be able to test that science, to perform and learn how to do that science in all the different fields, we have to bring to them a way to make science to do that science, to make that science, to make it hands-on, more than um, what is happening right now, some teachers will just draw the experimental setup, tell them what is expected, and then ask them to turn on a report. Um, if we are able to bring to them a very low cost solution to do uh, temperature measurements, to do um, control systems, to do a lot of all of these things in a easier manner, and so that your teachers would not worry about students quote unquote masisira yan, or it will be this system, these experimental systems will be handled by high school students. Now if we're able to bring it to them, then maybe the science, or the science that will be produced by our high school system, or the scientists that will be produced by our high school system, will be much more adept in whatever instruction that we will give in the university system. Right now, around a quarter of our population in the University of the Philippines College of Science in Diliman come from Philippine Science High School. Well, this is partly expected because that's one of the objectives of the Philippine Science High School system, to produce the young scientists who will go into the sciences. But the question would be, what comprise the other three quarters? Well, that 75%, most of them will be coming from private schools. Some of them also come from the city and provincial science high schools. So that is actually also contributing a lot to our scientists, our young scientist pool. And if we think about it, definitely those high schools who has a lot of investment in their laboratories, in their teachers, which are your private high schools, would have an advantage over other public high schools. So one of the things that we can do, or try to do with regard to STEM education, is not only just to improve the curriculum in the high school, but also to provide them with these tools. The problem, of course, is with the pandemic like this. How do you bring our students to the labs? Well, we can think of a way to bring the lab to the homes. One way is actually try explore whether we can do a visor at home, or even just your ordinary cell phone, and try to look at what sensors are around here. There's an accelerometer, there's a camera, there are a lot of sensors available in ordinary cell phone that can be used for science laboratories, quote unquote, that they can perform experiments inside their homes, guided by the teachers during this pandemic that we're experiencing. So all of these solutions should be explored, and even after the pandemic, they can be sustained by different ways. Like, of course, YouTube now is popular, Zoom is popular, but how do we target everybody? One of the designs considerations that we have had in Visor was to make it as low-tech, quote-unquote, as possible, because if you want it to be used everywhere, such as in an island where there is no electricity, you should not be depending on cellular signal. You should not be dependent on wall power lines. It should work with a battery. It should work without a computer. So that's why we just had a two-line display in the visor, because those design considerations would make it possible to be used everywhere. And if that is what we were aiming for, having modern science labs everywhere, then that's how we should be designing these things. That's also what we should be thinking about with regard to content delivery, with regard to using cell phones, for example. we cannot expect everybody to have bandwidth to watch on 1 hour YouTube. We should be able to deliver to them something that they can follow without being always online. So these are the things that we should be looking at, looking forward, because these technologies will be with us even after this pandemic. Maybe one last point with regard to hardware and software and well, what I call peopleware. Even if you have the nicest hardware, the cheapest accessible hardware for doing laboratories at home, even if we have the best curriculum that can be used by high schools all around, one other problem is our peopleware. We have to help our teachers to be adept as their students in using technology, in using these new ways. One of the things that we encountered when we were testing Visor around the country was that teachers would not want to use a new system like Visor because they don't want to change what they're used to. If you ask them, for example, well, please use this digital thermometer instead of that mercury thermometer, ayaw na nila. They don't want to do it because they're not used to it. They're afraid of the technology. Baka sila pa daw ang makasira. Maybe they're the ones to be the one. And that's the problem. So our peopleware is also a problem. So the hardware is there. We can develop it. The software, the courseware will be there. But we have to also focus in the peopleware. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tapang, and for targeting even the most remote places where students are. Thank you to you and to Dr. Mel Gomez for the Visor that you're doing, bringing laboratory equipment to even the most remote areas. That's your target. So maybe we can next proceed to our next speaker, Dr. Mario Santo Domingo of the University of Maryland. Sir?
Thank you, Chris. I want to share some slides, so if I can be given a host role. I thought I'll use some slides because this is a topic that is not familiar to most of us here, and I'll be showing some figures and diagrams.
Yeah, you can share your slide, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Giselle. So I thought I'll package this talk as about a bridge to STEM PhD, and I'll be talking about the story of the Meyerhoff Scholars program at the University of Maryland. It's a 30-year or 32-year-old program that was designed for underrepresented minorities in the state of Maryland originally, but it has actually expanded to the whole country. I was the one who suggested the last three discussion topics, but I thought that Marivic and Gani already covered the first one, which is like the strengths-based, student-centered approach, because so much of what they said are actually using the principles of student-centered and strengths-based learning. But before that, while preparing for this short talk, I tried to review, the Google group of PAASE and came across this statement from the late Dr. Perry Ong, the former Dean of College of Science of UP Diliman. He wrote that it's important to convince the youth to pursue a career in S&T and thus produce the warm bodies to ensure that the work of Filipino scientists continue long after we retire. Unfortunately, he left us before he sees the fruit of his efforts and how to encourage our PhD holders to mentor the next generation. So Perry was a very good friend and a colleague at the CIDS in UP Diliman in the late 80s and early 90s. So the Meyerhoff Scholars program is based at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. It started in 1989 to address underrepresentation of minorities in STEM. So the university is a mid-size, primarily white institute. And the first cohort started in 1989 with only 19 African-American male students. And then after the first cohort, it included a female African-American students, but because of the issues about affirmative action from cohort 6, it recruited all types of students from other races. Each cohort consists of about 55 to 65 students. So it is cohort based, so there's so much community building and the transmission of values related to community. Again, student-centered, strengths-based, and it's comprehensive because it's a wraparound program which include even the participation of families, okay? The goals are short-term to retain students in STEM and enhance academic performance. So it's a program in the undergraduate level with the goal of enhancing entry into STEM PhD or MD PhD. And the long-term goal, of course, is for them to complete STEM PhD or MD PhD degrees. So the major areas of concern of the program are academic and social integration. So they are very much concerned about the transition from high school to college and enhancing science identity and sense of community of the students. Okay, the second area is knowledge and skills development. So there's a major emphasis on the research experience of the students from the get-go, and of course the professional development. What are expected of scientists or emerging scientists and research professionals. Support and motivation. There's the financial award and heavy emphasis also on faculty involvement and mentoring. And fourthly, monitoring advising. There are advisors that are exclusively for the scholars of the program, a separate advisor for first and second and the third and fourth year students. And there is also counseling to take care of personal concerns. The program components, I'll not be talking about all of these components, but only probably the one highlighted in red. There are basically 13 program components. And the ones highlighted in red are those that are consistently rated by the students as the most important for them. So even from alumni who come back to campus, or even from alumni whom we do a lot of focus groups on. And these 5 most important components are the financial aid, the summer bridge. They are so gaga about the summer bridge, the program community, on-campus and summer research internships, and the availability of mentors. Okay, so this is like how the program runs, pre-college, year 1 and 2, and year 3 and 4. So recruitment selection weekend. During the summer bridge, which is a 6-week experience, the students are immersed in community building. They're required to do study groups and peer tutorials. They experience workshops in professional development and values development. Year 1 and 2, emphasis on academic courses, on lab visits and rotation, and the start of their own on-campus and summer research experiences. Again, peer and faculty mentoring, and then advising and counseling. At year 3 and 4, the ones that are different is that they are now introduced, to graduate program application. There's so much workshops and support experiences, and then of course the reviews. The goal is for them to enter STEM PhD or MD PhD programs. These are the outcomes that we measure each year. academic outcomes, retention, academic performance, in terms of research, their lab participation, conference presentation, publications, and we also measure a lot of cognitive or non-cognitive and psychosocial indicators, such as science self-efficacy, science identity, sense of community, and commitment to research career. Here are our research findings over the years. We found that compared to students who declined the Meyerhoff Scholarship offer. So we use the students who declined the Meyerhoff Scholarship offer as our comparison group. So through the years, we tracked them, and we found that the Meyerhoffs are 2 times more likely to graduate with a STEM bachelor's degree and 5 times more likely to pursue a STEM PhD. Okay, we also do a lot of modeling. So this is just one example of a mediation model where we looked into how the program benefits mediate, the relationship between psychological sense of community and research self-efficacy after the end of sophomore year. We've also looked into the ripple effects of the Meyerhoff institutionally, internally, and we found like a host of these effects, including the changes in the language or messaging among the faculty, from using, for example, the term read out to gateway courses, change in faculty attitude toward minority student achievement, the restructuring or redesign of science classes, the creation of new programs promoting collaborative learning and mentoring, the institution of an undergraduate research and creative achievement day, and the increase of minority enrollment in STEM. So we have documented increase of retention rate and GPA of minority students who are actually outside the Meyerhoff. In terms of the rank of UMBC, in production of, or the origin of Black science and engineering doctorate recipients. As you can see, maybe this is not too clear, but the University of Maryland, Baltimore County is now second in terms of the origin of doctorate recipients. And in terms of the MD PhD graduates, UMBC is now leading as the top origin or baccalaureate origin of Black or African American MD PhD graduates in the United States. Okay. Again, I've said that the program is an undergraduate program. These are the graduate schools where the Meyerhoff alumni go on studying or getting their PhD degrees. There are also ripple effects outside of the university. This is a study that we did with 2 universities that adapted the Meyerhoff program, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Penn State University. We found that compared to non-program students, students within the Meyerhoff-like programs had higher retention rates, in fact, significantly higher GPAs. And this actually became the reason why right now it's still being supported by the university. And currently, HHMI, or Howard Hughes Medical Institute, started like a program that will allow universities to apply for a Meyerhoff, a similar program to contribute to the enhancement of minority participation in STEM careers. Okay, these were the keys to success that we've delineated: a commitment to the entire model, sufficient and sustained administrative support, recruitment of full-time program staff, which is very, very important, immersive upfront inter-institutional training and sustained guidance, and the breadth of faculty participation. Currently, the Meyerhoff model is being adapted, as I've mentioned earlier, Penn State University and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. under the auspices of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. It also started to be adapted at UC Berkeley and UC San Diego with a grant from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And also currently, I think the Howard University it's on second year of adapting the model. Now, I was thinking, can we adapt this program in the Philippines? I had a discussion at PAASE during the APAMS, the annual meeting 2 or 3 months ago, and there was a consensus that in fact it can be adapted. But I also actually enumerated a few items here that I thought should be important before adapting this model. We need institutional or administrative buy-in. Of course, data infrastructure is very important. We cannot just lift and pile this particular model to the Philippines. We also need to consider the culture and values of the region where we may be adapting the program, or of the university where we are adapting the program. The importance of developing the research faculty, because the students will definitely need lab experience. The importance of assessment and evaluation so that we can see how the program is doing, both formative assessment, as the program is developing, and summative assessment, the assessment of STEM degree completion, for example, or entry to the STEM PhD or MD PhD programs of cohorts after several years, and of course the importance of sustainability. So we need to make sure that after probably the university president who started the program, who adapted the program after her or his term, we need to make sure that there are mechanisms that will sustain the program and that will make sure that there is enough support, okay, within the university and even within the community. So these are my references, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Santo Domingo, for that very interesting sharing on your experience about the Meyerhoff program. May we now proceed to our next speaker, Dr. Cedric Feistin of the Department of Computer Science. Sir, it's your turn.
Yes, good morning. I will also share some slides because I think the topic that I have for today is slightly or very different from the ones we've been discussing so far. And it sorts of addresses one aspect of the lack or the need for education in underserved communities. Okay, so let me share my slides. Sorry. Okay. So I think one item in the guide questions that was sort of presented earlier is actually how to reach places where communities are not served by our current infrastructures like cellular, Wi-Fi, or satellite. And the work that we have done specifically tries to address that particular need of communications in these areas. And fundamental to this challenge is the cost, the economics for our incumbents to provide coverage in these places. And interestingly, the places that we've seen in the Philippines, there are a lot, numerous places in the country that do not have this ability to even send SMS or have calls to those communities. And these are what we call underserved. So what we wanted to do was to build an infrastructure. But fundamental to this model is that we want to build an infrastructure which is community owned. The ownership is the community with the intent that they will sort of run the system by themselves. Now, we had reached an agreement. There's a lot of things around this project that required regulatory acceptance or sort of clearances. So we had one major sort of agreement was with a telco partner, which is Globe, and we were able to start deploying the technology in September of 2017, and we had this running until early this year. Early last year, late last year, 2019. So it's over 2 years of operation in places, and these are 7 sites in Aurora, which we sort of pre-selected and visited based on some criteria that they have no access to cellular coverage. And if you look at these areas, these are areas that are coastal areas and bounded by mountainous region, which is the Sierra Madre. So it's very difficult really for the incumbents to go to these places, invest capital expense in deploying their traditional infrastructure. So the intent was to study first-time adoption of community cellular in these places using technologies that are low cost and essentially small footprint, okay, low power and low cost. And when we sort of tried to do this in the past, we started talking with partners in 2013. So this has been running for almost the project 5 years now. We found that it's not only a technology solution, but rather there are social and economic and governance challenges as well. And I think, and I was looking at the acronym, it's STEG. Okay? So it's not STEM, but it's STEG. But we were able to do this. And the research project, which involved several partners, involved around 50 people. It's a multidisciplinary group, not only from the technology side, but also economic and social, essentially to understand this problem. And at the end of the project, there's some sort of tangible outputs that we saw. We're not even talking about the education requirement. Okay? So it's mostly for first-time access to the infrastructure. So it's calls, texts. So on their own, the communities were able to sort of generate positive impact in their communities in terms of many different dimensions. And interestingly, out of the 7 sites that we sort of deployed in, 3 came out as sustainable or viable, meaning they earned enough revenues to pay for the use of the infrastructure. Okay? Just to give you a highlight, it's a pretty basic. It's a 2G model base station. It can be run locally, standalone, so we don't need to interconnect with traditional infrastructure. However, because we expect that interconnection will sort of drive the revenues in this particular case, so we went through all the regulatory considerations and partnering with the telco. So essentially, this is the rough guide. At its core, it's essentially a communications enabler. So I think the needs for education is a natural fit. Okay? While we focus on these aspects, we definitely see that there are school children here, there's people here that needs sort of better ways to do things. Better access to resources, better experiences. Okay? So really, there's the potential for that. But tendentially, the social, for economics of this, before we came in, these things were not inexistent. When we left, there's e-load retailing, mobile phone selling. So there is this new opportunities on the side of having first-time access to communications in these communities. And it's quite fulfilling as researchers to see this happening on the ground. Okay. Now, it ended late last year or early this year, the project. And essentially, our partnership also ended at the same time because of funding and the agreements up to a certain point. So what is the next step? So, currently, the way we work the project is that we partnered with Globe. We sort of became the intermediary, and we partnered with LGUs and NGOs to sort of run the finances. So in a way, there's a social enterprise component in the model as well. So, it's not really purely technical. But this was the current agreement, or the agreement we had with Globe. So what's next? Okay. We have these challenges. Okay. So again, it's regulatory. Since we're using spectrum, essentially communications, we need to find a way to sort of address this requirement to be able to transmit. So we heard about ABS, CBN, we have the third telco. So similarly, we have to have ways to sort of go around this. And essentially our project demonstrated that this can be done initially by an agreement with the telco partner, or moving forward, be something like for small size communities, they can actually start their own telco operations as long as they don't interfere with the incumbents. And essentially that was what we were trying to prove at that time. There's also the technical considerations. While we focus on 2G, we need to look at better access technologies to enable higher demands in terms of bandwidth or quality in terms of communications. And third, the resources. So all of these things, like was mentioned earlier, we have a lot of things to say about this, but since we're limited, so I'll just leave it here and just mention the opportunities. So this is what we see that we can initially move forward on. We can actually look at LTE deployments. So this is a different cellular technology, but a different spectrum. And there's opportunities in using this in the unlicensed band. But there's still going to be regulatory considerations. And also for emergency communication. So remember, Philippines is typhoon prone or disaster prone. Maybe there could be exceptions in which we can actually use these particular technologies. And the third one is the People Connect. It's a free Wi-Fi initiatives. And we see that the ICT has this already, thinking that providing free Wi-Fi in places. And if you think about the project, it's actually a project that is the last mile. So it's the final connection to the far-flung places. So we can actually find ways to connect to this initiative as well. And I think the most exciting development so far is after the project, the OST has sort of came out with this publicity just last week or a few days ago. And they plan to build community-based cellular networks in remote areas. Now, the technology that will be sort of investigated here is the LTE technology. And the main application that they are looking at, or essentially the project is going to look at, is education, data casting, e-learning. So I think this is a great opportunity for the things that we're discussing today, that could be, or this could be a demonstration project as well to carry those the content down to far-flung places. I just want to note, this is actually a quote from one of our collaborators in UC Berkeley. And I think interesting here, it's a Twitter quote. It's from Rizomatica. So Rizomatica is a Mexican initiative, the first initiative of community cellular networks. And they acknowledge the efforts of the project. So we have visibility in that particular space. And we've been, part of the activities in the project was to really showcase the efforts here in the Philippines. So And also, I want to point out some of the team members have started their own group, the Cowing Innovations. So it's initially they're doing e-learning trainings, but at its core, it's actually a bringing this infrastructure to communities. So with that, I'd like to end. Anyway, this is the costing if you're interested. This is for a 2G setup. It's a little under $1 million a year, 2 years costing. But definitely, if it's going to be done later on, it could actually go down. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cedric Feistin, for your effort to reach out to very remote areas and solving this connectivity problem. More power to the VBTS.
Thank you.
Let's now move on to our last but certainly not the least speaker. Let's have Dr. Roel Ocampo from the Electrical and Electronics Department of the UP Diliman. Sir?
Good morning, and thank you, Dr. Bernido. If I may also share some slides.
Yes, please. Please, Roel.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. So the project that I lead is called PRIME, PCARI Research and Instructional Infrastructure for Mentoring and Collaboration. We operated in the K-12 space, but IT capacity development is all encompassing and perhaps agnostic of the year level. So what I would like to do is sort of do a quick retrospective on what we've done, and perhaps we can also see whether these can be applied to the K-12 space as well. So we started in 2016. It was originally just a two-year project. And our scope, our intention was very simple at the time, just to get other SUCs into PCARI, because initial proponents were quote unquote the usual suspects, UP, Ateneo, and so on and so forth. So the idea was these project teams would nominate something called an observer, another SUC, and we would come in and provide the tools for collaboration so that later on they would be in a better position to propose their own projects. And then it grew because, so from 2 years, we're now on our 4th year. And perhaps one reason for this is that we realized that the gap out there, the task at hand was really so big. And we're not only talking about IT infrastructure, which was what our main mandate was. The people element as well. For example, we requested CHED for this data, and we often use this argument to encourage SUCs to share, to establish this collaboration and the infrastructure. Half of PhD holders in engineering HEIs are in less than 10% of all of these HEIs. So there's a gap. And we were thinking this could probably be bridged by resource sharing in the broadest sense, ranging from academic material all the way down to people and physical resources. Now, given our modest means, we were thinking, now, where do we come in? So since IT is our expertise, then perhaps we can help with infrastructure, with enabling and training people, and advocating information sharing. So in terms of infrastructure, these are some examples. We procured 2 container vans worth of fiber optic cable. We distributed these to SUCs. In some SUCs, we actually did the installation ourselves. So we were pulling fiber optic cable. But as we were installing it, we took their people in and we trained them at the same time. So they were actually setting up their own infrastructure. In other cases, the SUCs knew what to do with it. So this picture down here, you can see that they're wearing masks, meaning, 3-4 years later, they still found some use for the fiber, and they used it to extend their campus network beyond the confines of their campus so that their students could still access the Wi-Fi infrastructure. In terms of people, training, we do a lot of training. In some cases, we do the training ourselves. So this is in UP Baguio. We lug, lots of equipment and then conduct the training there. Oftentimes we do this before that equipment gets given up, is taken home by the participants for deployment in their universities. This is a picture of us doing a short session with CHED MIS people. And in other cases, we just try to open up opportunities to other SUCs. So here, I think 2 years ago, we were able to sort of contribute to one of the biggest delegations of the Philippines to the Asia Pacific Advanced Network meeting. So we brought SUC representatives there, and there they were able to access training programs. This is one such session, and the trainer is literally an internet legend, Randy Bush, who's an awardee, so well known in the internet community. In terms of information sharing, this is sort of the core of what we do. We deployed video conferencing and network equipment. So this is in 2018, some pictures of our deployment in MSU, the main campus in Marawi. This was a few months after the siege of Marawi. So it was an exciting trip, to say the least. and this is typical for us. 4 a.m., 5 a.m., we're at the airport lugging, lots of equipment, hoping that they fit the X-ray machine, and then in the afternoon, they're deployed. And this, we've done this for a number of sites, 28 sites nationwide in 2017, 2018. Of course, we didn't leave it at just giving them equipment. We also actively advocated and promoted sharing of talks, lectures, when there are visiting professors. Like these are two events, I believe, at the College of Science, physicists from Japan. This is Jan Rabai from UC Berkeley. So these are broadcasted to all of these other SUCs. In around 2 years' time, we had 50 shared seminars. We also use the infrastructure to promote programs to industry. So this is one of our colleagues, Louis Alarcon, delivering a lecture to a room full of engineers at Analog Devices in Cavite, and the other way around. This is another colleague who happened to have a lecture in an electric power cooperative in Iligan, and he didn't want to miss his class. So here he is still delivering that same lecture to his class in Diliman from Iligan. We also use this to promote lectures between campuses in UP. And beyond short talks, seminars, lectures, single courses, we also thought, what about entire programs? So in 2016, we proposed that we open a remote program for the Master of Engineering program of EEE in Cebu. And finally, in July, we had our first two graduates. These are part-time engineers who attend in Cebu, but who got a Diliman diploma last July. And we're also trying to extend this so that universities will, explore collaboration as well. So, joint programs and things like that. So we started some discussions with universities. This is a meeting with the Cebu Technological University in 2017. So we started with 28 sites, and then the following year, we had a bit of savings. We were allowed to use that to expand to 12 new sites. And then in 2019, we proposed to Ched, you know, there's this big gap out there. Why don't we expand even further? So we were given a list of 87 SUCs and included in the scope of what we should be doing this year are 13 Ched regional offices and 7 sites in the main office. So all to be equipped with video conferencing capabilities. And we also decided to pivot from the expensive Polycom appliance to Zoom. And we were thinking at the time in 2019, maybe there's something with this Zoom thing. And we had no idea that Zoom would, you know, blow up, you know, like it is today. Now, there's what I'm thinking, a southbound gap, meaning gaps within the universities locally, basic capabilities, IT capabilities, and, you know, some of the quote unquote elite universities here. But we also recognize that there's a northbound gap, meaning us as a country and the really cutting edge research universities in the US. So since the skill sets and the people on our side are more or less the same, we also started to campaign and advocate things in the space of high performance computing and networking. We brought SUC representatives to NERSC, the supercomputing facility in Berkeley, as well as ESNet, the high-speed network that carries unclassified research for physics and high energy physics. We're meeting here with UP Baguio, MSU IIT. We also organized a high performance, in 2019, the first high performance computing and networking conference. It's a local conference. And this is a room full of trainees for HPC tutorial. So where are we today? Obviously, because of the pandemic, it's a bit difficult, but we wanted to transform this. And we said, we tried to rally IT people in SUCs, you know, despite the pandemic, tuloy ang infra development. So we hosted a number of seminars and workshops, including LMS installation and things like that. Tomorrow, there's a question mark here because we're still waiting for approval of our extension. We would like to persist in the space. We're also doing a number of things in advanced networking. So this is my last slide, and I'm already 1 minute over. But the pandemic has been very disruptive, but on the other hand, we can transform this disruption and use it to our advantage, because as I think pointed out, there are a lot of barriers, even to remote learning, even to the idea that you teach a student, you know, in another geographic location. So this is being progressively broken apart, and hopefully we can use this to our advantage so that Philippine universities work as one rather than, you know, 2,400 separate institutions. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. And good morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ocampo. And thank you for your initiative of providing infrastructure for the different institutes to collaborate and doing these things all the way to high performance computing. So I think we can now open the meeting to questions. Dr. Giselle?
Yes. I think, Chris, it's great. We had a good, slew of speakers covering cognitive to non-cognitive aspects of STEM education, and finally covering infrastructure required for STEM education, especially during these times. So, well, it's good that we have Zoom and it works, Roel. And so I appreciate the comments, suggestions, inputs from everyone. Thanks for joining us. I wanted to recognize Ferds de la Cruz, also of engineering, former head of Manila Water. And there are others within the PAASE who are here. We have CP David, who co-hosted Fireside Chat 2, who's really also on top of our S&T Human Capital Development paper that we're trying to produce. We have here Dom from USAID Stride. I think Richard Abendan, our member, is at another meeting. Thank you so much, everyone. We have our PAASE officials here, Lulu Harold, who's into education. We have our former president, Al Sarafika, who's also very much involved in education in the Philippines. So at this point, we have Joyce Ibana and May Lim, who are our star faculty and educators in UP Diliman. I'm sorry if I do not recognize everyone. Dr. Veronica Mico, Lisa Virat, our former PAASE chair. At this point, I'd like to open the floor to questions. And if you have any questions, please raise your hand electronically and also visually, videoly. So it's free. I see Al. Yes, can we keep it to one simple, not complex question, 2 minutes or so? Thank you, Al.
Thank you, Giselle. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to get this is our third fireside chat already. And clearly after the stride focusing on the Higher Education Institute and then the education sector and STEM, I think I'm trying to get a theme around each and every one of your technologies, from Visser to the technology DLP of Chris and Marivic to Cedric's community. These are technologies that I've been mentoring from UP for the last 5 years, at least from the Tikari and TTBDO side. And we are in the process of creating more value propositions to your technology for adoption. And so for me, the path forward for us in PAASE is to build a team around your technologies and your advocacies, and then start talking to your customers. In your case, Marivic and Chris, clearly DepEd is the customer in this case, but you should have available data beyond what you have already. Even the FINMA Education has been using your DLP program. What's data coming out of their system for college? Use that data for convincing Dr. Briones and everybody else in that area. Again, the key is to have a value proposition for each of your customers that need to be able to adapt, pay for, scale up, or implement your particular technology. And in each case, magkakaiba yan. It can be the LGU, like in your case, Cedric, or it can be the congressman in case of Gani's adoption in Zamboanga, or it can be indeed NGO or the ERDP, like I see Tito a while ago, who's supporting as well Visser. So I think that's probably for me a path forward for us in PAASE, is to be able to say, okay, we know you are there, Ruel, you know what you're doing, you know who's your stakeholders in your group, who can we contribute, maybe power, connection, people, money, but we build it and then we take it on and see which one will yield the fastest possible success for us so that we can build momentum, the low-hanging fruit.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al. I think with Chris and Marivic, if the FINMA schools can really come together to convince DepEd to get you mainstream, that would be great. So Marivic, you have something to say about that?
Well, actually at present, because of the pandemic, there is now closer collaboration between us and the DepEd, actually with Smart Communications as the intermediary. So the learning activities that we use in our school have now been made available at DepEd Commons. I mean, there are many other learning materials, but they have a folder there for our learning activity sheets. So in a sense, the collaboration was forced by the pandemic, at least although it's still optional. I mean, I think several divisions by now, in Parangani, in in the north also, in NCR has been interested, the National Capital Region, Butuan, and so on. So there have been several divisions actually. But as far as the data, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Marika. I'm sorry. I thought you were ending.
I would just also like to make it clear that at present, Chris and I, running the CBIF, it's a small school in Bohol. We're running a tight ship. I mean, we're lean and mean. So we don't have the staff that people at UP have, for example, the caliber and the resources and so on. So we keep on mentioning this to people. We don't advertise our program. It's up to them to make use of it if they wish to. There are so many resources now online. They could do that. So people who are interested, they could ask us. But as of now, as I said, we're running a tight ship. We cannot go around collecting data. If FINMA would like to help, then they do the collection of their own data and document it and forward it to somebody who can analyze the data. As of now, Chris and I are very much involved in creating and editing the learning activity sheets created by the teachers, because in a sense, you could say that we are able to link up to the level of each student in each school through the learning activity sheets, because it is individualized. So even if there are no qualified teachers, even if it's pandemic, the students are at home, in a sense, we have a link with each student through the learning activity sheets, which we take seriously, of course. And my production is actually very slow, but at least we can be assured that the students are learning something, hopefully significant enough. So that's my answer to it.
Yes, Marivic. So before I perhaps ask our Dean Gani to also tell us about his experience, again, to reiterate, Al, Marivic, more than ever now, we should push stronger for, say, the DLP program that requires few expert teachers, right? Now, before I ask Dean Gani to speak, I'd like to recognize the presence of our PAASE members and UP faculty and officials, Ricky Nellis and Isa Yu. And then we have the representative from the Gokongwei Group, Grace Cole. And we have one from media, Timothy James Dimakali. And I think I would like to hear a lot of people speak. After Dean Gani, I will be on the lookout for raised hands electronically and videoly. So Gani, maybe tell us about St. Joseph's College.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, a few years ago, I went to Bohol to see to a conference sponsored by CBIF on DLP. And one of the interesting things that came out of that, of course, Dr. Marivic and Dr. Bernido were my teachers, so I'm very happy to see them. But aside from going to Bohol, one of the things that came out of that conference was when we returned back to Manila, it was really just a present and then leave within the day. Somebody contacted us from Cubao, and this school, St. Joseph College, was telling us, I'll use Tagalog, nakita po namin kayo dun sa conference nila Dr. Marivic, at pwede po bang gamitin yung DLP at yung Visor? That was the thing that I had presented there. I left that question hanging in that conference. Can we use something like Visor with DLP? The idea there was that DLP has this individualized program. They bring students. Can the students do the science, enhance the DLP program with something like Visor? And when St. Joseph College, St. Joseph High School, actually, the one behind Aurora Church, in the church in Aurora in Cubao, asked us, we want to try out your Visor, but we're using DLP. So what we said was, okay, we'll help you. And the Diocese of Cubao was interested enough to say that, okay, if this will be successful, we'll be doing this for the other high schools that we have. And we actually have already a sort of curriculum designed around Visor and DLP, and hopefully what we wanted was to test it, to evaluate it this coming summer, but the pandemic happened, and that is something that we have to do again next time when things are available. But that is actually one possibility, and the other one that Mario was saying earlier, can we do all of these and merge all of our technologies together? That's something also that we can explore, because the projects of the EEE department of Roel and Cedric came much after when Visor was thought about, when all we had was just Bluetooth. We were never thinking of long-term data gathering or using sensors over radio. Maybe now is the time to revisit that whole idea of having large distributed sensors in the hands of high school and elementary students. Now we can do large-scale citizen science, not just with phones, but with things like Visor that can be brought to them through other means like the DepEd, the high schools, foundations that are here.
So Gani, thanks. Earlier, before we started formally 8, we were having a discussion with Cedric and Roel and Mario about where we can implement this right away. Always we need some political support, right? So, well, it turns out 2 of them know Mayor Joy Belmonte of Quezon City. And you know, Edna Ko also interacts with Mayor Joy. So, you know, we could think of Quezon City High Schools, or even PAASE, the main campus of PAASE is in Quezon City. We should really try to get this thing going and showcase some proof of concept or principle. But we also have another potential place to do it, because Mario Santo Domingo is directly connected with the University of Rizal system. So I was telling Roel as well that he should include URS in the prime group of SUCs, and keep an eye on URS. And Mario could start something, you know, that's really a integrated approach based on our discussions today. I'd like to hear from people like CP, of course, from Sec Willie, Dr. Willie Padolina, also from TJ Di Macali from media, from Jane of Ayala, and Grace of Gokongwei Group. And I don't know if Benedict Buhain is still here from Unilab, but please feel free to speak. Dr. Padolina, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Giselle. It's been an interesting discussion. I just have one point, and that is related to both Roel and, of course, Dr. Bernido and Dr. Feistin's presentation. And that is the role of our local electronics industry to produce the sensors, the hardware, instead of just concentrating on exports. For a long, long time, our local electronics industry has not addressed these problems. They're all oriented to exports. It might be a good move for PAASE to convince our local electronics industry, which is rated to be one of those that export high tech, but we don't enjoy the high tech that they have, the capacity that they have, because they have not been producing any products like the one that Dr. Feistin is looking at, or the one that Roel is looking at, and the one that Gani is looking at. You need sensors. You cannot just, you know, design an experiment unless you have sensors. And I know that in NIP, they have the capacity already, and even in engineering, to produce these sensors. But it will need capital, because you need to mass produce them so that they will be available to our DepEd and even our CHED schools, institutions. That's all I like to say, and that is to encourage our local electronics industry to please address our local needs and produce products that will be of benefit to the Filipinos, and not only for export, which they have been doing for all the time. Thank you.
Dr. Padolina, I'd also like to recognize Kate Manalo. Kate, also with JG Summit. I'd like to, well, hear the comments and the views of some of our guests. Thank you. Wants to speak? CP, would you like, well, while waiting, CP, would you like to say something? I know you have a class, so you might want to speak now. Yes.
No, I've been taking down a lot of notes from our speakers this morning, which I hope to integrate in our position paper. Dami kasing issues when we talk about STEM education at the primary and secondary and even at the tertiary level. We have to discretize, I guess, the issue so that, because if we take it as a whole, then it's just too complicated for us to tackle. I wanted to, well, as we speak, I'm outlining everything that has been said today. So forgive me if it's not coherent at this point in time. But number one, the first thing I wanted to share with the group is that, is there a lack in STEM interest coming into college? So that's the first question that came to mind when I was drafting this. And from the papers of Dr. Padolina and Dr. Vic Paqueo and Ched, apparently there is enough interest in STEM going into college. In fact, the number of students going into engineering and science far exceeds the number of students in countries like Thailand and Vietnam. And we are at par with, in terms of interest at least, with Singapore and Korea. What I think is important to mention is in terms of the quality of the people coming into college, and then the college programs beyond the bigger schools in Metro Manila and some regions. The quality at the tertiary level is also something that we have to address. And some of the proposals I heard today try to address that. So I guess I'll stop there kasi ang dami kong sinulat this morning, but we just have to separate these problems even if they're all interconnected.
Thank you, CP. I'd like to perhaps hear from Jane De La Cruz. Are you willing to speak?
Hello. Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
A very interesting talk now. I'm actually really interested in this because my parents are both teachers. That's why I was very interested in this talk. And also, my background is in electronics engineering. I think my question, Sana, is how do you encourage students also to, be interested in teaching STEM? Or like, I think, kasi napansin ko na STEM teachers would encourage, diba, STEM students to take on STEM in college. So, but then I think there is a gap in yung style. Like, I think this is coming from seeing the news in the ed yung 2x = 0 mali yung
Okay.
no.
Jane, you're
So
breaking.
yun sana.
Okay, Jane,
How do you address that?
I kind of want to help answer that while waiting for people to raise their hands. But Jane, you know, in UP, we are like all now free tuition. Scholar ng Bayan is in real terms. Everyone is free tuition. And then we had this Visor program. And so Gani said, there's a real fear for teachers to handle instruments to teach the students. Imagine a public high school. So I had proposed, and I had conveyed this from the president to the chancellor to the dean, that one nice program would be to get our juniors and seniors in the UP to volunteer to serve as a way to give back, return service, but on a voluntary basis, especially the student leaders, to be trained by our College of Education and by NIP to use Visor. And then afterwards be deployed with pay by the Department of Education to teach in the public high schools. And they would only give back maybe for 2 years, because then there will be this continuous flow of volunteers from our scholars ng bayan, being trained from the junior to the senior years in UP, say to teach STEM, to use Visor, and not to have a fear for using the instruments like some of our public school teachers would be. And I thought that would be perfect because of the dearth of teachers during the K-12 transition. So who would be teaching the 11 and 12 levels? Anyway, that is a suggestion. And I think they try to, deal this with the Department of Ed to provide salaries for our teachers, our prospective teachers. But I don't know what's happened to it now. So that's one thing. May I hear from, are you willing to speak, Grace? Are you willing to speak, yes, Grace first, and then Lulu? Yes, Grace, please. Thanks.
Thank you to PAASE for allowing us to listen in. I really apologize because I came from another meeting, but Kate was able to catch the whole session, so we'll align later. But generally, our question is really, how do you see the role of non-government organizations or private sector coming in to help with your various initiatives? Thank you.
Oh, that's a very good question. I will ask perhaps Chris and Gani to answer those questions. Chris has experience with SMART, right?
Yes.
SMART.
Yeah, in relation with the CVIF DLP, which is now slowly being spread out even in public schools, we are always open to partner with anyone from the private sector. We've had a long-running partnership with Smart Communications, but it's not limited to Smart alone. And everybody's welcome. So just holler and we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Likewise with UP and Visor. But one of the things that NGOs could actually facilitate is there are a lot of the bottlenecks with public high schools and public institutions is really how do you move these materials around, and procurement would come in, and therefore, for example, if you have a device being bought by the DepEd, it's so hard to really bring something new inside the DepEd, and NGOs are really one way to can augment and help in that side. Of course, there are a lot of ways that NGOs can help in, not only with regard to that procurement of materials, but of course also in bringing people, the experts around. There's a lot of things that you can do. I know GBF would have a lot of experience, but you have scholarship programs as well. Maybe to also follow up with what Giselle was saying, maybe have something like that embedded in one of your programs for not only return service to GBF, but also return service to those areas that are underserved.
Yes. For example, in our case, I think the NGOs can serve as a bridge between us, between Gani and the government institutions. In our case, it has always been Smart Communications who has been doing the legwork, an intermediary between us and DepEd. So now, for example, all our learning activities are now uploaded in DepEd Commons. We hardly move a finger. It was Smart who did all the legwork. So the NGO can be the bridge between us and whoever, because they have a lot of contacts. They have a lot of network. And our time, for example, is constrained in a sense.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Giselle.
Yes, Lulu Harold next, and then Dr. Esther after Lulu. Yes, Lulu.
Oh, you want me to go? I'm sorry, I missed the first part because I attended a meeting in person. So I missed the Bernido's talk. What I want to address is, number one, is something that Jane alluded to, which is the development of a strong science teaching or science teachers to teach in the lower grades and so forth. If we don't have that, we will lose them in the 8th grade. I'm more familiar with the United States, and we have noticed in the 8th grade, they lose their interest in STEM. And so I think aside from developing technology, which I am very impressed with, with all the people talking because they're more physics oriented, I would like to see more curriculum development in university, especially the education department, to develop science teachers. And number two, I want also to see the development of science courses for non-science majors, which we do in the university that I came from. Because if you don't do that, we will have, who makes the policies in the United States, but the non-science majors, the politician. If you don't teach them the right scientific method in grade school and introduce science courses, at least one, in the university, hello, we will have problems. I'm not mentioning any country here, but anyway, I think both countries are suffering. And also, the other thing is, I wasn't here about the approaches. I think I told Giselle, I was very impressed with we're so used with the deductive approach, wherein we teach the principles and then they verify it in the lab. I'm not sure how it's taught. That's how I was teaching the whole time, organic chem, etc. And then I decided to teach again after retiring, and I was invited to teach organic chem, the inductive approach, wherein they're looking at patterns in order to arrive at the principle. And I said, say what? It's very, very hard to teach, but it's very effective, because if you do this, then they can think scientifically. And if especially for the non-science majors, we will develop politicians who can use the scientific method. Of course, there's room for both, but to utilize this, because it makes them think, and I think they will be better researchers, who can do independent research or develop more projects more easily by
Yeah.
It's just that.
Great, Lulu, thanks for saying that, sharing that. We had our cluster meeting on education earlier this week, and I think we are going to come up with some education materials, videos. It's a challenge to demonstrate this inductive approach to education. So I think your comments, your suggestions are highly appreciated. Thank you. We will now hear from Dr. Esther Garcia.
as usual, I'm in a hurry to go to another meeting. That's why I'm volunteering now. But and I have many comments about a lot of things, but I would like to concentrate on the NGOs that are around because they're asking how can we help. There is a group of schools in the DOS in the under DepEd that are called. These are the provincial science high schools. Actually, DOST was helping them for a while, but turf issues, as usual in the Philippines, the DepEd decided that instead of DOST, it should be them that should support these schools, where they were supported for a certain period. But when the DepEd secretary who proposed this retired, nawala na rin yung support. But they have the potential, so you cannot spread your resources too thinly. May I suggest that you work with Chris and Dr. Tapang and who else was in the EE department, and DepEd to support these particular high schools. They are DepEd science high schools in the provinces, have no resources, have difficulty procuring materials because of all the crazy rules of government. So this is where I think that the private sector can have some impact. If you work with these guys who gave these nice talks, Ruel and Giovanni and Chris, Marivic, and also you have to work with DepEd, of course. Good luck. But you can concentrate your resources on this, on the high schools. I have to go because I have another meeting.
Thank you so much. I'm aware that Ayala had the Apex schools, although I understand that this has now been sold or largely sold to the Yuchenko group. Is that right, Jane?
Yes. So it's a partnership. It's now IP people.
Yes. So
yeah.
We can reach out to Ray Vea, president of Mapua University, who's a member of the PAASE. Okay, if you want to pursue this suggestion of Dr. Esther Garcia. Same with Grace and the JG Summit group. I'd like to also add that because I think the JG Summit group and the Ayala group, they are the Taipans who are most invested in science and technology. Okay, so you do have investments already in the areas of science and technology, so you appreciate the value of expert and competent scientists and engineers. And you know that, you may have foreign multinational partners, but then the idea in PAASE is we aim to create science and technology innovation ecosystems in the Philippines that would involve multinationals that are leading industries or our companies, as well as SMMEs. And for that, you would need the manpower. That's why we are so concerned about human capital development, because otherwise we will never start to produce many of the goods and services that we should of higher value, and we will always rely on importations. And therefore our economic growth will not be inclusive. So we think this is very, very critical at this time of the pandemic and also in the VUCA world to invest on the medium to long term in S&T, human capital development, not just S&T, but for the whole education, knowledge disciplines. I'd like to hear from Mario, because Mario has some plan for University of Rizal system. Yes, Mario?
Sure. Yeah, before I tell you the University of Rizal system situation, let me just go back to the point raised by CP earlier about the quality of entering students in college. I just would like to caution us to not automatically assume that the students entering college are of low quality because we are falling into the trap of the deficit-based model, in education, and ask about what we can do to, for example, increase retention. We can ask questions about whether if we adapt, for example, the DLP, would it significantly, for example, raise retention rates or perhaps GPAs, or if we adapt technology like Visor, would it actually help enhance, retention? So I just like a caution about that particular mindset. Okay. Now, so you mentioned URS. I actually initially a few years ago thought of starting a Meyerhoff-like program at URS. So University of Rizal system is an 11 campus university system. So it has a wide reach, like thousands and thousands of students. But then I was disheartened when I studied the data and realized that, okay, we cannot start such a program with strong STEM students if your faculty is weak. If you don't have like an active research system, facilities, or research facilities that can give adequate research or lab experience to students. And so therefore we must start with the faculty, I thought. And then we looked at research policies and publication policies of the university, and they're also wanting. So it's the whole system that needs to be overhauled or to need to be modified in order to even start a program like the Meyerhoff Scholars program in the university, using, for example, the LP and then Visor. So that's one thing. It has to be a really a comprehensive approach, and not just looking at the students, but what, for example, the Stride was proposing about this multi-level, reform in the universities. So
thanks, Mario. I think we need to, as you say, discretize in terms of levels of education, but also discretize in terms of, say, campuses or schools where you can test this method and showcase success or proof of concept or principle. So before I ask Tte Deployments, who graduated from, I think it's Harvard, TJ, am I right? Your master's? To speak, I would like to know whether Cedric and Roel have any responses to the comments and questions of our guests and our our PAASE members.
Yes, I think the project that we had, we worked with cooperatives, but essentially to deal with operations on the ground. And I don't see, I mean, I can see that NGOs can take that role. And we had discussions with Globe in particular that maybe some of these communities that we were sort of working with after the project can be adopted by NGOs. And I think we were supposed to meet with GK or Gawad Kalinga to sort of push for this. But somehow things fell through. But I think there is, I mean, in terms of programs, GK sort of had some initiatives that sort of ties in with the connectivity aspect of the project. And I think it's in their space. So I think it's possible to look for such partners on the ground as well.
Thank you. Thank you. This is the purpose of this chat. We're gotten to know one another now. We're going to be academic, professional, and personal friends. And we're all embarking on one of the biggest, most major advocacies for this country, which is really education, okay? For the short, medium, and long term. Roel, do you want to say something before I go to TJ? And afterwards, oh, I'd love to hear the views of our faculty. I'd like to recognize Menchi Lagman from DLSU, formerly from MSI, and Perry Esguerra of NIP. Thanks for joining us. But I'd love to hear from May, Joyce, Isa, Perry, and Menchi, and Professors Emeritus Sean Raimundo and Veronica Mico. So, Roel, yes.
Maybe a short story. When the pandemic hit So everyone was mandated to shift, faculty members to shift to remote mode. And one of the things, especially those in UP right now, you've heard of the term course pack, right? So everyone was asked to prepare course packs. And, you know, a lot of people were overwhelmed. They still are because it was such a huge task. But I posed a question to some, why are you worrying about your course pack for your class of 50 or so when there are 10 of you teaching the same class and you can partition the job? Each of you are experts in some area and you could share across, you know, those 20 sections. And in a way, this also reflects how we work nationally across institutions. We try to deal with our own problems. Even in UP, we still probably have that mindset. You know, colleges don't really work that closely together, not even departments. So maybe something can be done there, and maybe, you know, the technologies that unite us now, Zoom and so on, can help us along that way. I would also like to briefly comment on what was pointed out, the role of NGOs for bridging. I think that's a very good thing. A lot of times, some of these NGOs are also foundations, CSR organizations of the big companies, and they could help a lot. I mean, providing infrastructure, talking to Globe through some sort of quote-unquote neutral intermediary, even talk to Meralco so that we get permission to install fiber optic cable going to that remote school. Those things will help a lot. So, you know.
Roel, it's fantastic that you mentioned team teaching, because it's something that I advocated strongly when I was a VPAA of UP. And I said, you know, considering how specialized the fields of science are now, within a course, you would probably be the expert for one module, one chapter, 1, 2, 3. So 3 units, you team teach, and then you can teach it several sections. I mean, that's the way the world works. In the United States, courses are team taught. You have graduate courses and you get outsiders to give talks in your course. There's not just one teacher, because then you're open, the student is open to the minds of so many more experts, okay? And it's built in. Then the student evaluation of the teacher is also better, because then you're able to compare the performance of different teachers. See, so I'm not sure that until now, this is being done, and it's really a way for you to focus on your specialization. But the trade-off of that is the teachers, the team teachers, have to spend time to work things out together, right? To, put a thread to the whole thing. Okay, so that's really good, Roel, and I'm hoping that this time with Zoom and many opportunities, not just threats. Think of the new positive opportunities during the time of COVID that we're into in education. Think of all the MOOCs that are already developed. You don't reinvent the wheel for science. You can just guide your students in very reliable, high quality MOOCs. That's why I'm also always wondering, why so much stress with the course packs? I mean, you know, if I could do it, I would do it maybe in a less stressful way, guide in a less stressful way. So I'd like to hear from TJ. TJ, please. I know TJ has lots to say. TJ, yes. Hi. You can't be heard, TJ. There you go. There you go.
Hello, sorry. Good morning po sa inyong lahat. As I mentioned in the chat thread earlier, ayun, salamat po sa lahat nung shinare niyo po. We're living very interesting times, to say the least, ano? And a lot has been said over this morning's discussion on how we're bringing the technologies and the methods up to speed. But what hits close to home for me as a media practitioner, and what piques my curiosity, is how the medium itself is evolving. to address these needs. Kasi ang nakikita po natin ngayon, so everyone's going to videos, online videos, di ba? Yung synchronous and asynchronous. Specifically in relation to asynchronous teaching, what hasn't been looked at, and we're still in the, it's still evolving sa nakikita ko, is ano yung mga video formats and presentations, which ones are effective and which ones aren't. Ang nakikita po natin ngayon, and DOST in particular, DepEd, we're yung kani-kanyang formats for the modules that are going online right now. It's interesting to look at how these are received by students and what they're and how these are consumed and received and understood by students. Last point I wanted to say, and I think I said as much in this chat, was that all of this is looking forward in terms of technology and bringing kids up to speed with current technologies moving forward. But what I find interesting also is how these initiatives are complemented by pushes elsewhere in other universities to look back on the history of science, and specifically in the context of distance learning, to have kids make, for instance, sundials, astrolabes, to teach them about the history of science and to help them get engaged and learn more about science in that way by looking back. Yun lang po.
Thank you. For everyone's information, TJ is a freelance journalist, writer, but he earned his master's. TJ, please tell us again your background, your expertise. Please tell us.
I graduated from MIT Science. Yes.
Yes.
In 2018.
Yes. So science communication expert. And TJ, I'll be happy to let you know that we have our PAASE YouTube channel. Okay, and we will really need your help, your advice in getting this YouTube channel of the PAASE. It's really focused on education as well. Okay, so at this point, I'm happy to let everyone know that our UP Diliman Chancellor, no less, Professor of Mathematics, Fidel Nemenso, has joined us. But before we ask Fidel to speak, maybe we can have some of our faculty from Diliman and from LaSalle give their responses. What about May? May Lim, and then Isa Yu, Joyce Ibana, you're still, yes, you're around. May, yes, please.
Thank you very much for everyone's talks. It's enlightening and really interesting, but at the same time, I actually deeply appreciate the talks of the Bernidos. I've always been listening to every time they speak. And as I was saying, one thing I deeply appreciate with what they've done is time management is built in to their program. And that's something I think that is being also affected by the shift to remote learning at this point, which is there's probably not a very good idea how much time is now needed for students to effectively study. And so one of the questions I had is there an effort to actually scale down what they're trying to cover this semester and even moving forward, because the spiral mode and everything, it's taking too much time. And it's probably not the most efficient use of time. How do you figure out what are the barest essentials?
Yeah. So I think that's so important, May. So, we're always information overload. So now you have to shift from the, Marie-Vic and Chris, I said Marie-Chris, Marie-Vic and Chris, I'd say would be essentials, peripherals. They have this article on essentials and peripherals, first principles, etc., and then examples. And then for wider information, knowledge, you can point out, say MOOCs, reliable sources of information. But the thought, the thinking process, the experimental design, these are things that we want to teach, right? So before I move to Joyce and Isa and Perry and Nenchi, I'd like to hear from Liza Virata, our former chair of the PAASE BOD, who's based in the National Institutes of Health in the United States. And one of her mentors there just earned the Nobel Prize in Medicine for the hepatitis C virus. Liza V, please. PSI alumna who is trying to help PSI in many different ways. Liza V, please.
Yes, I just typed in a very naive question. Are science and math courses in the elementary and high school level are they being taught in English and not Filipino? And this is just an observation, personal observation. I think it's still a problem in the regional public schools for the students to learn correct English and, comprehension, which are essential in learning anything, much more the complex concepts in science and math. So I think we have to strengthen our teaching of English also at the elementary level, just to give them, the tools to read and comprehend all these complex concepts in science and math. That's my take on it.
Thank you, Liza. I think we have answers to these questions. Quick answer, Marivic.
Yeah. Well, language issue is so contentious. Some people say one group, several groups would say we should teach them in their mother language, because science, for example, requires deep comprehension, not only of the science concept, but the thinking processes involved. They have to go through it. And if you don't teach them in their mother language, then there are definitely knowledge gaps. So in our school, for example, because that's a serious problem, again, it would require several hours of discussion and study. But in our school, what we did was we teach the sciences and mathematics in English, but we have a safety net, which means teachers can explain the concepts in the vernacular, in the mother language, in Visayan, in Filipino, but all the learning activities are in English. So it's a multilingual approach. But at the same time, because we know that English is the global lingua franca and they need to be good in English, then all the other subjects in the high school curriculum would form your safety net for them to learn English at high performance levels. And since I'm already here talking, I would also like to address what Lulu mentioned, that there is a common observation that by grade 8 or grade 8 of students, that's around second year high school, junior high school, they start losing interest in the sciences, in mathematics. But I would like to tie that up with observations that by grade 8, based on different curricula all over the world, that's the time when they seriously start learning algebra, functional analysis, and geometry at higher levels. And then if you do not have good teachers, not good materials, a poor curriculum or a weak curriculum, then definitely students will start losing interest because they realize they do not have the tools nor the proficiency levels they need to be able to understand and work with these scientific concepts. So it jibes with our observations. And another point, sorry Giselle, but I would also like to react to Roel. Was it Roel or Mario? Because in UP, you are worried about course packs. In the DLP, actually, it's built in. We've had parallel classes for the longest time. And now we have, say, 7 sections in math, grade 7, or 7 sections in grade 8. So you would have 7 or 5 teachers, actually. Math teachers, they work as a team to design the learning activity sheet. They upload it in a Google Drive so I could check it. I do the final checking, and then before it is printed and distributed. So for the longest time, it has been team teaching for our teachers, precisely because we could pull together our abilities. That's all I wanted.
I believe in that, Mari Vic. Non-stop, I just kept on ramming it, the idea, and how to do the credits for teaching. and team teaching. Anyway, I see Perry, with his video on. It tells me that he wants to say something. So if you want to say something, Joyce, Aiza, Sean, Veronica, Menchi, please turn on your video. So it's my cue. And then our Chancellor. Okay, so after, I see Joyce now and our Chancellor. So Perry, and then Chancellor, and then Joyce. Thanks.
Yes, about the course packs and team teaching.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So the first point is that team teaching does not have to happen synchronously. So I can cite, for example, our general education course, Physics 10. And in a way, what happened was also teaching, in the sense that every instructor since 2005 or thereabouts has handed down his presentations to the next batch of teachers. So team teaching can happen that way.
Wow.
Now, well,
generation.
Yes. So, but the challenge this semester is not actually in the general education subjects. It's in the specialized subjects for the majors, where there's only one teacher and there's no team to speak of. And okay, and so yes, so I think that the big challenge this semester was the short turnaround time that was needed, because right now I'm handling multiple subjects, and in those subjects I'm the only teacher. Okay, I tried using my old notes, but they don't work, because those notes are notes to myself. They're not notes for the students. So yes, team teaching is a good idea, but sometimes you don't have a team.
So talk about the dire dearth of S&T experts, of S&T human capital in the country pervades teaching first and foremost.
Yes.
But then you can do things. You have your collaborators. You have expert MOOCs. You just have to make time to select enrichment courses.
Yes, but sometimes curating takes even longer than just preparing the materials yourself.
So PAASE should help. That is what we should try to do. Okay, and we had several talks. Of course, it doesn't cover the whole range, but I'm sure some of our physics courses could make use of those PAASE talks.
Well, not just the PAASE. Yes. I think I was lucky that for one of the courses I'm handling, there's someone from Mapua who started teaching a counterpart course starting in August. So whenever I'm pressed for time, I tell the students, hey, I don't have the time to pre-record my lectures for this. Please go to Ernest Bacalalad's lectures on YouTube.
Imagine. It's inter-university. We're going to hear from our Chancellor now, and afterwards Joyce. Fidel, thank you so much for making time.
Hey, good morning. I want to take off from Lisa's comments about language. The Philippines prides itself as one of the the biggest English-speaking nations, and yet where has it gotten us? I think that English comprehension is important. It should be part of the school education, especially because it's the lingua franca of the international scientific community. But it is not necessary for education, because if you look at our Southeast Asian neighbors, I mean, they have developed their language so that their language is capable of doing science. I think what is important here is to teach math and science in a language that is close to the child's experience, and that's the vernacular. The problem with our kids, there's a big divorce between the language of the mind and the language of the heart, the language of play. And I think science and math education will be more effective kumbaga tagus sa puso. No? If you speak it, if you teach it in the language that people use every day, people say that Filipino is not that developed. Well, so was Japanese at the turn of during the time of the Meiji Restoration. But what Japan did was to send its scholars to learn the math and science of the West and bring back and translate everything. If there was no available vocabulary, then they coin it or they just adopt the English word.
English.
Yeah.
It's okay as long as you
Anyway, I teach my higher math courses in Filipino because that is what the students are comfortable with. Even if I teach it in English, if I eavesdrop in their discussions, when they do their discussions after class, they all speak in Filipino. So what is important is that you teach it and they learn it in the language that they're most comfortable with.
So I think that's very well taken. It's related to Esther Garcia's comment last week, where she's not talking about young children or even teenage school students, talking about all the efforts taken to try to get S&T to farmers and fisherfolk, and it's very frustrating because at some point they just abandon it. They don't know, they cannot embrace it or ingrain it, and it's social, cultural, and language based. I think that's why Mario Santo Domingo is here. Fidel, I don't know if you know him. Mario was with CIDS. He's our psychology alum, UP Diliman, and now he's trying to help University of Rizal system. But that is his hypothesis. Non-cognitive is so important. Language, social, cultural learning is based on those factors.
Can I say something? I mean, I actually, growing up, I had English was a psychological barrier for me. I think I started speaking English in high school. I could read English perfectly in grade school, but something in me just refused to speak it.
Oh my God, but you're such an expert.
Nakakatakot.
So bilingual is good. Thank you.
And all our Thai colleagues, our Japanese colleagues, our Indonesian colleagues, they're publishing. They're doing deep science,
Yes.
and they learn it in their language.
And of course, if it's math, quantitative science, I mean, it's not all language based. Thanks for that. So we'd like to hear from Joyce. And then, yes, Joyce. Hi.
Good morning po. That was the topic on course pack and the childlike, fun in learning. Actually, when we were preparing it, I was thinking of ano ba yung mga pwedeng ipadala sa mga students. And I was thinking of like an activity pack because they're teaching immunology. For example, I'm teaching forward and side scatter. And I started to think, how are the phases of the moon taught in high school? And I would remember, we have this cartolina and you put the sun in the middle and you have this. And I said, what are the students learning here? Just the sequence. But if you actually ask them, how do you get new moon, full moon, and everything? So now you have a 3-dimension. And I was thinking, can the students actually work on it at home? And then they would learn the reflection of the light and the angle. They learn mathematics, geometry, and physics. And then so as another thing that I was thinking as an immunologist, so how do you teach herd immunity? So naisip ko, coming from doing what we can with what we have, inisip ko, we have suka, which is acid. We have sabon, which is basic. So can we actually send students buffer so that it could represent vaccination and infection is acid, and you put an indicator and you give them tubes and they could actually calculate how is infection rate going when you have this much of the population of tubes that has buffer. So those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking that perhaps we can actually make learning more enjoyable and actually more action-based as well, in addition to learning the fundamentals by sending lessons. So that
so that's part of what I was thinking coming from. And also even the microbiology. You buy gelatin from a grocery store and cook potato, and then try to do environmental studies where how much microorganism will grow in a dish. So parang the joke with our students, at least in my research group, I said, can I just send you a gift pack instead of a course pack, like this kinds of things, and that's one. And another thing is, I guess we emphasize the importance of teaching basic science in school, because I think students will learn how to navigate uncertainty if we actually push them to have a hypothesis and not really knowing what the outcome is. And finally, for something actionable, I think I could perhaps, if this is something you think worthwhile, I could volunteer my research group, which I meet every Friday, to adopt a high school, for example, a mentor and a student. And because we actually always discuss science every Friday with my research group, and perhaps that's something we're always thinking of, how can we help? And these are just some ideas. Thank you very much. And thank you I've learned a lot from many of you today. Thank you very much.
I know Joyce resonates with Marivic and with Lulu, and of course with me. And she's a champion of arts and science. So she does her science better because she does her art. So she's a painter, and she's featured the flowers of UP Diliman. Okay, and she's offered this. She has a video with the oblation, and then ending with the new sculpture in UP of a woman. It's titled Uplift, which was installed during the time of President Pascual, who I'm happy to let you know has joined our discussion group. I know that Sean Raimundo has turned on her video, and you might want to say something, Sean, but we also want to hear from Menchi and of course from President Pascual. So thanks all for joining us. Sean, yes?
Okay. I'm just following what Joyce said. In microbiology, you already have a whole set of exercises ready for the different schools in the whole of Philippines who are members of the Microbiology Consortium. Each exercise was designed by one university, and so put all them together in a website, and thus different universities can now have a whole set of exercises for the basic course in remote mode. So they do it in their homes. They're required to do some experiments, and then they turn to their teachers the results of the experiments, and they have discussions. But like also to say that I really support the program of the Bernidos. I have been a fan of them, Barvik and Chris. Remember 11 years ago, I invited you to the College of Arts and Sciences when I was dean. And I was already then impressed by your program. And it took 10 years before now it's being picked up. I also agree with Marvick that I think the spiral system didn't work so well. The product of that system, the new freshmen they are not ready to take on the first biology course. They are so ill prepared. So it seems that did not really work out well. Okay, I'm into activities right now, so I go back and forth. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Sean. I'd like to hear from, are you ready, Menchit? Or
yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, very quickly.
Yes.
Very quickly, I just look at the numbers, and if the number of high school students is about 2 million, only how many of that are going to go to college? And of the colleges, they're focusing on the big entrance into the big four, we'd say, universities. So it's inevitable that high school education is going to be exam-based towards admission for college. And that is why some people are kind of resistant, moving away from the non-traditional exam-based, sitting in classrooms, multiple choice sort of learning, because they're focusing towards that admission exam. I also want to put on because I have a 13-year-old right now. And I have a student an older child who has already finished college. I would also want to put a word for the farm schools, the trade schools, because they really need our help. one of the things that I really want to see is that we professionalize that area and not have this divide between agriculture and industry, agriculture and service, but it's like part of the mainstream. And that is the very reason why I'd like to put the kind of work I do, there's DNA, RNA, all of those stuff, into the hands of farmers. One of the very interesting exercises we had on the summer that I was actually given practicum kids in biology was go to a farm school and then create, in part of their curriculum, they have this NC2, NC3 certifications, which hopefully is there to professionalize the agri-industry and the formation of organic farming and all that stuff. And what we did was, I had to teach my students because I could do it, but what is the point if I'm going to do it? But I taught my college students who were graduating by that term doing their practicum, and we set up 4 stations, which during that day of the farm school curriculum, one was in making yogurt. And you could see how they can explain microbiology, fermentation, in techniques, and come up with a product, which is yogurt at the end of the day. We did a station on pH meter because you know how much pH is just the major indication in agriculture of the soil quality. And we developed something we got from the web was on cabbage, purple cabbage, but we tried to standardize that for blue ternate flowers and create a pH range for them to learn in that station. And another station, we tested a DIY tissue culture kit that we are trying to come up with. And you can bring them copies of photosynthesis, of acid bases, of colloids, and all that stuff, light, in something like that. And the farm school that we worked with was so interested. It raises the image of what agri really is. And it's not hampas lupa, it's not, magtanim na lang tayo ng kamote sort of how we actually see that profession. And we have to start at the very early stage. So things like mobile apps to differentiate species, these are the things that I want to do just to raise the image of agri, integratively teach the topics in something that's very tangible that these people can actually understand. And hopefully one day you'll have people wearing, like in Australia or something, wearing corduroys, riding motorbikes, clocking in with IDs. And then when you ask them, where do I work? There. And they're going to be very, very proud that they're agriculture people.
That's fantastic, Menchi. I think, Lulu, you must get Joyce and Menchi into the rec of education, okay? Because we're gonna prepare 5-minute videos and we will ask each rec to contribute, Menchi. But I think what you're saying is just so important. We have to get not just PhD level experts, we need the skilled and competent persons in the farms, the farmers and the fisher folk. And LaSalle is really focused now on agro-aqua industries, helping these industries. Aside from their modeling, their biologists and their chemists and their geneticists are really focused on, alleviating what? Poverty, hunger, malnutrition, and all that. So that's so important, Menchi. And what you've proposed here is that the students themselves use as practicum time spent training our farmers and fisher folk in basic science or leapfrog science, including genetics, right? So this is something that Toto Oliveira tried to help with the Bernidos by sending PhD experts levels to their school, and they learned DNA barcoding and all that stuff. So thanks for that, Menchi. I know challenge, of course, is TESDA. TESDA, what kind of training do they provide, and what kind of certificated training can our workforce earn? Okay.
Just to add to that, ma'am, I have a software engineer student here, and then he said he actually enrolled in Samsung Tech to study what he doesn't learn in college, and he enjoyed working there studying there for courses. So it's like there is this divide that it seems this is for university and this is for tech school, this is for agri and this is for industry. It's something that we have to break somehow.
Yeah, but we do have to address that because in K11-12 we have the tech book track, you know, aside from the STEM track. Okay, so we have to raise the quality of our tech book. TESDA cannot be training for manicurista, masahista, you know, waiter. Okay, it's got to elevate to the electronics, and I know they're doing that. Okay, thank you, Menchi. I think at this point we'd like to hear from Fred Pascual. So, President Pascual, how are you? And you know, you're one of the greatest advocates of human capital development. Are you there? Yeah, well, during your term. And I know you said it in our last Fireside chat that we have to start earlier. Okay, all of you, Father Ben, you said we've got to start in the earlier ages. So I don't know if you are ready to speak, but anybody else? Aiza, are you in another meeting or are you ready to speak? Yes. You can unmute yourselves and show yourselves on video. Anybody else wants to say anything, please just at this point speak. Yeah, I think people are at other meetings are just wanting to hear. So is there anything else that we would like to discuss? Chris? Yes,
Can I
please.
ask a question? I wasn't here for the Bernido's talk. And I realized that can I ask them a question?
Of course. Yes, of course.
When I was going through your talk in another meeting, it seems like the success of your program is the way they pass the exam to get into UP, you know, from the very beginning to the end. You remember you cited that at the beginning, very few can get in, and then later on, a lot of them can get in, because somebody mentioned that right now, the preparation for college is very difficult. Was it Menchi who said that? That she has a child who's going to college. And I begin to wonder if your success, I was just thinking about it, if your success is based on the fact that you are always, that you are always testing the student in the activities, and therefore they are more prepared to take exam to get into college. Because I noticed that when I was teaching, you know, I was the guinea pig, I was the control. They did not give me 3 things that will increase their success. However, I was using a lot of quizzes every time, and that prepared them to the final exam. And my students stopped my class stopped the other 2 sections, the other sections that had the supplemental activities to help them increase their success. And I began to wonder if the assessment that you have in the undergrad, which you use a lot in your activities, am I right? Because I haven't read them. I'm sorry, because I was late too. Matches very much the challenge in taking the exam to prep them for college. Because somebody mentioned is where I don't know, because I begin to wonder if there is a relationship in that.
Well, actually, passing college exam is something which they just pick up along the way. It's not the end goal. It's just something that they pick up along the way and so on. It's more like the thinking process that we're trying to mold in their mind. For example, in the CVIF DLP, for any new topic at any grade level, there is no prior lecture. And then they just go through the activities, they just copy it and try to answer 2 or 3 questions in the end. So it's the discovery approach in a sense, and so on. And we never really trained them to pass exams, but they just sort of pick them up along the way. Maybe Mariby can.
So we have a normally the term there is holistic. It is system-based. Because you see, the goal of high school, the role of high school really is to expose the students to the whole spectrum of human endeavors. That's why they have different subjects. Just so when they have developed a certain level of proficiency in the languages, in mathematics and science, then when they match their talents, their abilities with the possible careers in college, then they can make an intelligent choice. So that's the role that we take seriously for high school, to increase their levels of proficiency, to make sure that if they choose engineering or the sciences, then they would have the skills necessary to complete the course, to go the distance. Now, as far as exams are concerned, because there are now schools of thought which go against giving of standard exams. But for us, the students have to be exposed to standard exams, pen and paper exams, because they will always encounter somewhere along the way these exams. And therefore, they should also do well in that. But we do not gear their education towards exams alone, of course. But yeah, so it's not geared towards that, but they pick it up along the way, because when you have a whole system or holistic approach, then their education becomes strong enough and broad-based enough that they will do well in exams, and not only in exams, but after they enter college, and if they do pursue graduate studies, they would still do well all throughout. I hope we answered your question.
Oh yeah.
I think, yes, we have to note that CVIF has a remarkable or impressive passing rate in the UPCAT, and it's growing in numbers every year, Marivic and Chris. And so that question was raised the other night at our pre-meeting, and we wondered, do you, because there still are questions in the UPCAT that are, based on facts. So it tests your the breadth of your knowledge, okay? And for example, for the longest time, there's questions in scientific names, okay? And then there's, of course, the Filipino based questions, okay? And so we wondered how your students could cope with those types of questions in the UPCAT. Of course, there's always questions balanced between analytical questions and those that are knowledge or fact-based questions. And then there are those that are combined. So they're actually rated, okay, as a combination of both. So maybe Chris and Marivic can answer that again.
May I just add something, because Dr. Ben Rubin, the PhD who visited our school and spent one semester with us, and he's actually working with the new Nobel Prize winner, Jennifer Doudna. He's now working with her. But when he came in and started helping us, and our condition was that he applied the DLP, our learning way, he was surprised when we told him that our goal is to make exam taking a pleasurable experience for students. Am I still clear? Yeah.
Can you hear us, Giselle? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So we were talking over dinner, of course, and we say our goal at the CVIF is to make exam taking a pleasurable experience. And he laughed because he said he could not imagine. You normally associate exams with anxiety, with nervousness. And so we told him that it's the day-to-day process, the biological habits formed by the students as they answer these simple-looking activities with simple-looking exercises, but it's low stakes and it's day-to-day. They form the habit. And then when it's exam time, many of them are actually excited to take the exam and to test themselves whether they learned something. And when Ben Rubin he actually did a survey, and in his survey he asked a question: what interested you most in the course? What made you happy? And many of his students answered the exams. And so yeah, because they said, and the reason why was because the exams made them think. So yeah, so at least by now he agrees with us that we could actually make exam taking pleasurable. And when the students enjoy taking the exam, then of course they would do well. More of them would do well.
Yeah. So I think also at this point, Marivic, it's time, Chris, time to raise again the point made last 2 nights ago, that during this time of limited resources, there's difficulty to perform experiments, to test a hypothesis or to demonstrate some principles. But we said that because of ICT, because of Zoom and all the other platforms, there may be a way around that. Say, making use of visors. So again, the experiments are simple. The visor instruments are simple. They measure simple physical, chemical parameters, pH, temperature, pressure, etc., etc. But then, you can video and demo and experiment, and it can include the quantitative measurement and, the analysis of the experiment. So there are many ways to get around this. Most important thing, Marivic and Chris, is that you're able to teach the first principles, the most important principles, and the design thinking, the thinking out of a box, okay? And it can now extend also to biology, because this is always our concern. How are you going to teach biology, biodiversity? How are you going to teach chemistry? The molecules or, the way reactivity. But there are ways of doing it now. Of course, in our case, we were trying to help you teach it through the biodiversity of the mollusks. And that comes with the fascination for the beauty in nature. So it really stimulates the creativity of the student, which is the same thing that drives art and science anyway, right? So maybe it looks like we have exhausted our discussion, but I texted President Pascual. He is attending to another important matter. He's listening to our discussion and will not speak. But I'd like to end by saying that, this is one of the things he mentioned too. Is it STEM? Is it STEAM? Where A stands for agriculture, or it also stands for art. And you know that in CVIF, they teach drama. They teach the classics. Chris and Marivic has this program where they teach Greek tragedy, and they enact these tragedies. Actually, in the UP College of Medicine, for the longest time in the biochemistry course, the students who are multi-talented in dance and music, they would demo biochemical principles through art and music and dance. So I think it's the same creativity that drives science and art, and therefore we should really invest in the holistic, interdisciplinary education of our students. So with that, I think I would like to hear from our Chancellor once again, because he's a champion of art and science, and he's now ultimately responsible for UP-Diliman. So Fidel, please give us some of your wise words. Yeah, you've been a leader in UP in COVID time, okay? And now we're thinking, how are we going to address COVID and VUCA in the immediate, short term, medium term, and long term? And of course, it's got to be a major investment in education. Fidel.
Thanks, Giselle. No, you already said the word interdisciplinary. The problems of the world are very complex and cannot be captured or understood if we work in silos. I think the way to go right now is to study our respective fields, disciplines as well as we can, but really reach out and find connections with others. I think we have to work in teams, multidisciplinary teams, to attack, to find solutions to the problems we face. It's a complex world out there. And the experience has shown that no single discipline will have an answer to to the problems of the world. I also, I like these conversations because these are, I mean, this is a group of scientists talking about education. I think one of the problems of education really is that the gap the gap between those who do science and those who teach science. But I think it's also a big responsibility of scientists, mathematicians, to think about the problems of education. And there's a lot of good work being done in the colleges of education. And I think along with our research in science, we have to think deeply about how the younger generations experience and learn science, because it is equally our responsibility to make sure that the younger generations learn their science and mathematics well. Anyway, thank you, Giselle. I'm sorry I was late. I was not able to listen to the talks. I would have wanted to listen to the talks of Marivic and Chris.
Yeah, so, well, I'd like to, echo what Fidel said. And I'd just like to say what I like about Fidel's writings and speeches is his deep philosophical underpinnings. And Marivic said it as well. Ultimately, we are responsible. We are accountable. Okay, it's as simple as the Little Prince saying, "You're responsible for the rose forever." Okay, and so all of us are PhDs, or majority of us, at least in the academic community. Jane and Grace, we are doctors of philosophy in a particular science discipline. So first and foremost, we must know the fundamentals, the fundamental philosophy that we believe in. And in the UP, we always look to the oblation as a symbol of what we think would be the meaning and purpose of our lives as individuals, as members of our families, our communities, our nation. And I think that living a meaningful and purposeful life is what each of us should think about. And to me, those two words are constitute the balance of of how a person should live. It's a yin and yang thing. It's a personalized feeling thing, as well as a very rational, purposeful thing. And we know that at the heart of it is really our education, our own education, that we should impart or transfer to the education of our youth, our Filipino. So with that, I'd like to thank all of one for your meaningful participation, such burning ideas shared with us. And that's why we're keeping the term fireside chats, okay? I think that's what it means. It's very Filipino. I thought so. Hindi lang naman yung fireplace ni Frank Delano Roosevelt in World War II. Hindi. I was thinking about the bonfires, all the cooking that we do with siga, So it's mind flares. It's things that really light up our eyes and our minds. And we should be sharing this in a very intimate platform like Zoom. So we'd like to thank Zoom. This is my first time to thank Zoom, but I think, my gosh, you're growing your number of academic, professional, and personal friends because of this platform. So everyone, thank you so much for contributing your time and your ideas to this Fireside Chat 3. And we look forward to Fireside Chat 4, which is on trying to come up with a journal that could be hosted by PAASE. It's still controversial. We're hoping that you would consider making Philippine Science Letters the PAASE journal. And it's really a training journal for our young scientists and engineers. So we will be sharing with you the poster for Fireside Chat 4 on Philippine Science Letters. It will be co-hosted with Wendell Rivera, who is my co-editor. Some of you have published in PSL. It's got a very nice online format. And we're thinking that the the clusters in PAASE would come up with their special issues per discipline or per topic. And this could be published in Philippine Science Letters, ISI listed, and earns an IPA. Until now, we still give IPAs as incentive. It earns an IPA from the OVPAA. Okay, but one day we should not need this kind of financial incentive to publish, because it should be second nature to all of us. So thank you very much, everyone. We've, well, it's 10:52, so we're like together for almost 3 hours of very valuable, constructive time. And CP David is not here, but there is a recording, because we're gonna try to get these main ideas into a paper that we're planning to write, okay? A PAASE position paper on S&T human capital development. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good day and bye-bye. Till next
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our main discussants. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. I took a photo, actually. I took a good photo of us. Okay, thank you.
Bye.